Good evening. It is Thursday, August 31st, 2023. This is Jason Horak reporting on the ongoing adventures of the Dodge Daytona electric vehicle. Well, the car ships to Missouri on September 4th, giving me approximately 3 more days to get the car ready to go from this evening. I wanted to just go ahead and show the progress of where we're at this particular moment and try to explain some of the reason why I'm in super hyper stress mode and hoping that I can get everything put together in time. So first off, let's take a look at the axle. When the car was down at the shop getting inspected, they discovered that the driver's side CV axle thing broke or was all tore up and was leaking all over the place. So they went ahead and replaced it for me. So that's all nice and shiny, and hopefully will not have any problems when I'm out at EVCCON. Everything else down here is looking pretty good in the front. They did remove the front brakes and like the calipers and stuff and lubricated them and made sure that they were working okay. And so they were not too much of a problem. And now around the rear of the vehicle, when they were working on it, they noticed that the rear brake calipers were completely seized up and weren't moving at all. So they said that I should get new ones, but unfortunately, they don't exist. For some reason, the 1987 and 1988 Dodge Daytonas, their rear brake calipers are unobtainium on anywhere on the internet or any part stores, anywhere. So I looked around and did a lot of searching, wasn't able to find them. We're talking eBay, junkyards, the whole works. Of course, the ones that are at the junkyards are just as rusted up as mine were, so that's not necessarily a win. But the shop was able to do a rebuild kit, which took a week to get here and put me kind of behind schedule by about a week. But they were able to do a rebuild on it, and I guess it's kind of a lost art form, because on other cars, calipers are so inexpensive these days that it's just not worth the time of the mechanic to go ahead and do a full rebuild. And so, sometimes they take them and they send the broken one off to some shop someplace that actually specializes in that. And for them, it's worth their time, but for your average garage mechanic, it's just not. So in this case, they were able to do it for me, which was very nice, and they got them all working and reinstalled. So these are all rebuilt and good, and new pads and all that good stuff. That lever that you can see there is the parking brake. So in this particular vehicle, when you press the parking brake, it pulls that lever down and engages the brake. That's super essential on an electric vehicle, because or on this electric vehicle in particular, because even when it's in gear, you can freely push the car down the road, or it'll roll on any kind of surface that's inclined, because it doesn't have any compression on the engine. And so, even in gear, you can just push the car, no problem. It rolls very freely. So you have to have the parking brake working. It's like essential. And luckily they were able to get that working. So yay for that. The car ships out for the Electric Vehicle Converters Convention, EVCON, for 2023 on September 4th. That is approximately 3 full days that I have remaining to get the car ready to ship. Well, it's not in a good state to ship at the moment, and I'll show you why. For one, there's no steering wheel, or no steering column. When I took the car down to the shop to get it inspected, and asked them to tighten up the steering column because it was a little bit wobbly and sketchy. They started tearing into it and discovered that it wasn't a simple bolt or something that needed to be tightened, but rather that the metal had fatigued and torn inside the steering column. It wasn't fixable, and I was kind of in trouble. Fortunately, I kept around my 1988 Dodge Daytona Pacifica, the old electric vehicle, and that still had a perfectly functional steering column, steering wheel, the whole bit. So I was able to pull that out of there and take it down to the shop so they could install it and have the car pass inspection. Some other issues that are going on while we're out here in the garage is that, as you can see, there's no cover plate here that normally it's like a molding piece, trim piece. That broke, and we're going to try to glue it. Also, the T-tops have been removed. This is the T-topless car. And the issue is there's a plastic piece that goes around and it kind of covers up all this metal stuff here so you don't hit your head on the metal and stuff. It's kind of a curved plastic piece. Well, that broke also. So that was all broken and mangled. And so I took both of them off, for both T-tops, and we're going to try to get them all glued up and repainted and make them look nice. Also, the parking brake release lever normally sits right about in here, and when they had it at the shop, they broke it. And so the little plastic just gave way and it's busted. And of course you can't buy new ones anymore because, hey, 1987. So we're going to try to get that one fixed up, or maybe I'll grab one from the other electric car, the old electric car, and it'll be deep maroon just like everything else from that car, but maybe we can get that painted up and it'll work. So that's all the little plastic bits and stuff that are busted on the car. And the last major issue that needs to be dealt with before the car can ship to EVCON is the charging situation. So this is my Manzanita Micro PFC 50 charger that I bought from, I believe his name was Brian, at one of the conventions. He had a used one. I'm not sure how he acquired them, some kind of big lot or something. But anyway, it worked good and kind of got me out of a pickle that year because my normal, smaller Manzanita PFC 40M charger had broken and I had no way to charge the car. So being able to buy, this charger on site really saved my butt. Since my PFC 40M is broken again, I'm now back to this guy to charge the car, which is fine. It does take up more room in the trunk, which is not ideal, but it does work and has been very reliable. So I went and hooked it up and hooked up my charger buddy, had everything going, and it didn't work. The charger buddy refused to see the voltage from the pack, even though I was getting voltage on the leads that were plugged into it and could test that with my multimeter. So there's some problem. I don't know if it's actually with the charger buddy auxiliary unit. In there, some of the wiring shook loose with me banging it around, or if there's a problem with the sensor, with the meter. I don't know. So I got to take that apart and fix that. But for right now, I just plugged in the charger directly into the outlet that I have in the mid battery box there. You're not gonna be able to see it because it's super dark, and then charge the car, and we're up to 195.7 volts for the 59 batteries, which is pretty darn close to fully charged. I believe a resting voltage of 200 is what I was shooting for, like 3.4 volts per, but anyway, it's enough to have the car charged in order to drive it onto the trailers and ship it, so I'm not real concerned about that at this point. And the car has driven quite well. Driving it around town and stuff, it's been driving really good with the steering column issue that it had before. Yeah, so anyway, let's go ahead in the house and I will show you what's up with that whole steering column situation, as well as the parts that we were repairing, little plastic bits. Okay, so we're going to take a look at some of the bits and pieces from the electric car that my friend Chloe attempted to repair yesterday, and we'll just see what we got. So these are the pieces that go inside those T-tops that I showed you earlier, and you can tell that it cracked completely here and separated. She managed to glue the heck out of it with some JB Weld epoxy stuff, so we're hoping it's going to hold up. And it looks reasonably good. I'm going to do a little bit of sanding on this and then paint them hammered black, so they should be all nice and shiny, and hopefully no one will ever even know that they were repaired. This piece here is a door trim. It goes along the bottom of the door on the driver's side. So this one had cracked right along in here, and this piece was completely broken out, which is this little stud that the screw holds on to hold the piece in the car. So she glued the heck out of that as well, and we're going to repaint this because you can see it's kind of scuffed up just from getting in and out of the car and stuff. This was originally hammered black before, so we're just going to refresh that and make that look as nice as we can. So this is the parking brake release lever. So this kind of sits underneath the dash and you sort of pull it up this way to release the parking brake. The parking brake is very essential on the electric car because when you put it in gear, there's no resistance from the motor that prevents the car from rolling away if it's on any sort of incline. So you really have to have the parking brake, and it's got to work well. So when it came back from the shop and they had accidentally broken off this piece of plastic, I was pretty bummed. We attempted to glue it. You can see kind of some of the JB Weld there. We used some like metal washers to try to reinforce it, and it just didn't hold at all. The JB Weld's just falling off, and the as you can see, the JB Weld didn't stick like at all. So that's awesome. I'm not sure if it's because it's this ABS plastic or what's going on, but yeah, it didn't do very well. So anyway, so this is broken and not going to be fixable within the time allotted. So what I did was I pulled the identical piece off of the parts car. So this is, again, the 1988 Dodge Daytona Pacifica. Had one that is not broken, and of course it's dark maroon. So my plan is to hammered black this one as well, and it should blend in pretty nicely, with the car. The color isn't exactly the same, but it's pretty close, so it should be okay. And yeah, anyway, this is the linkage mechanism that kind of goes in this little slot, and then is what pulls, like all the force is pulled right on the edge of that. So I'm not really surprised that it broke, but it's unfortunate. So anyway, so that's that. And then I got my uncle picked up this Gorilla Tape to put the badges on. So what it is this double-sided tape, and Chloe kind of cut out all the contours for me and put it on the back of the badges, and then I'm going to get those affixed to the car. Now it's pretty thick stuff. We didn't realize how thick it was going to be once we got it on there, but hopefully it'll kind of blend in and give the badges an even more 3D look than they had before. I guess we're going to find out. Alrighty then. So this is the project that I've been working on with the two steering columns from the 1988 Dodge Daytona on the left and the 1987 Dodge Daytona on the right. There's kind of an interesting story here, and it was sort of a nightmare. But basically, when I took it to the shop, they had found that the steering column itself was damaged. So here is I'm going to try to get my light here from the phone. I'm not sure how well this will come out on camera, but you can kind of see in there that the metal is just ripped on the steering column. So the reason why it was a little bit loose in the car was not because of something had loosened up as a bolt or something, but rather that the metal had torn, and it is not a fixable situation. So luckily I had a 1988 Dodge Daytona Pacifica, former electric car, with a perfectly functional steering column that's nice and sturdy and was working great. So I ended up pulling that out of the car and took it down to the shop. They put it in, it worked fine, they passed the inspection on it. Now you'll note that the original steering column is a kind of dark gray color, as well as the steering wheel, versus deep maroon that was on the 88 Pacifica. So yeah, it doesn't match really well and it clashes horribly. The steering wheels themselves are interchangeable, and I can just put the steering wheel, the gray one, I can put this steering wheel on that other column and it, bolts right on, no problem. But it's gray and this is not. So it looks kind of terrible. My plan is to paint this. And so I had taken it all apart for a couple reasons, which I'll go into in a moment. But while it's apart, I'm planning on blue taping the heck out of all these other edges and wrapping it in plastic and stuff, and then spray painting this plastic piece here, this plastic piece here, and this plastic piece here with hammered black. And so it won't be a perfect gray match, but it'll be reasonably close to the original kind of dark gray plastic that was on the old one. I had originally thought that I could just take this plastic off and transfer it over to this guy, but unfortunately that just doesn't happen, or isn't going to happen within the time I have allotted. In order to get the plastic piece out, so we're going to pan back over here. In order to get this plastic piece here, you have to disassemble the entire steering column. All of that stuff has to be removed, all the wires have to be removed, and this thing actually slips off that way. So it's kind of the last piece of the entire assembly that has to come apart, and while I don't really mind doing that on the broken one, I do not want to rip all that stuff apart on the perfectly functional one and then risk loosening things up or breaking some wires or just basically screwing it up when I have to ship the car next Monday. So we're just going to leave this as is and do a little bit of spray painting and hope that works. So there were a couple other issues. One issue was that when I got the steering column back from the shop, they had left the original lock assembly in. I forget what these are called. Lock cylinder. And so this is the key and the lock cylinder from the 88 that was in here. And I wanted to remove that and swap it with the lock cylinder from the 87 because this key and this lock cylinder and stuff matches the doors. So the ignition key then matches the doors, matches the trunk, all that good stuff. And I wouldn't have to have like separate keys for ignition and doors. I already have to have separate keys for the T-tops, so I just don't want to add another layer to that whole thing if I don't have to. So anyway, I figured, okay, how hard can it be? Locksmiths do this all the time. They swap out the lock cylinders and all that good stuff. Well, as it turns out, nothing is ever easy. And what it required to get to that lock cylinder, it has this little depressible piece here that's kind of got like a spring behind it. It's like a little metal piece that you can push in. And this sits into the column about like that, into this hole. And there's a little slot way down in here, which I'm not sure if I can actually even point to looking through the camera thing, but anyway, it's a little slot that you have to put a long screwdriver down in and push on that little springy thing in order to have this thing come out and be released. So after putting it back in, real simple, you just put it in, slide it in, it'll snap in place and it's good to go. Getting it out is a pain. But to get to that little thing so you can put the screwdriver in, you got to remove all this fun stuff. There's a spring that goes around the shaft right down there. And then what that presses on is this ring here that's like for the horn. It like transfers the horn and gives you your power and stuff to the horn. And then this lock ring is the super tricky part. So what this does is it goes around this shaft, and if you see this little pin right here, this pin comes up and goes into the slot which locks the steering wheel from turning when you lock it with the key. So you do the key lock and it doesn't let it turn. It's because of this falling into one of these slots. This thing is pressure fit in there with that spring, and in order to get it out, you have to remove this tiny little ring that goes around. There's kind of a slot right in there. I'm not sure if the camera's making it out, but there's a little slot that this ring goes into, and that's what retains this whole thing under a tremendous amount of pressure with that spring behind it, which is all well and good, but it's really hard to get out unless you have a special tool. So I had to go purchase, luckily we have a Harbor Freight here in town now, I had to purchase this tool, which is a steering wheel remover thing, and it screws down. Let's see if it gets out of the way a little bit. So it goes onto the shaft like this, and you see you screw it on there, and then it presses with this fork of metal, just presses on this ring to kind of push it in just a little bit against that spring mechanism. That allows you to then wiggle out that lock ring, which is it was kind of a nightmare. And you have to do the same process to put it all back together. So I'll be using this tool again to put it back together. Yeah, it was $40 for the kit. The whole kit was, not too bad. It's got all kinds of different adapters and things for different setups. I only had to use those couple pieces, but hey, what are you going to do? And now I have the kit just in case I need to rip apart my steering wheels again in the future, I guess. Anyway, so that was this whole ordeal just to get that ring out so that then I could put the screwdriver in so that then I could pull out the lock cylinder and then be able to put in the new one. So I haven't done that yet because I want to get it all painted first before I put all the stuff back together, so I don't end up having to like tape this all up and put blue tape on it and stuff. It'll be easier to just paint it without all that stuff in it, and then it hopefully will look nice when it's done. The other major issue was that this, it's kind of hard to, let's see how I'm going to show you this. So this is the turn signal stalk. The turn signal stalk does a lot of stuff in this car. It's kind of amazing. I'm sure other cars have the same stuff, but I never really thought about it too much before now. But we'll take a look at the one that's here on the old one, just because it's out. This whole mechanism is just interesting. So this metal bar, this metal rod, is actually the whole gist of how stuff works, and it can tilt up, tilt down. That's your turn signal, left and right. It can go forward toward you, which is like a toggle for the high beams. It can press in, like in that way. When you press on the end of the little cap there, it presses in on this, which is the windshield fluid, washer fluid. And then if you twist it, it has several positions where when you turn this whole rod, it's like on and off for the wipers. And then as you twist it more, it does like intermittent wipers and stuff. So it's not just like on off, it's on off, and then the more you twist it, it's intermittent stuff. So all of that happens with this magic little rod here. And in the original 87, it just had this plastic tube that goes around it, and it was very simple, not a lot going on. It didn't have any kind of mechanism behind it, other than just it slips onto there, and then it bolts. You can kind of see these two screw holes here, where this bolts on and holds it firm so that it doesn't turn when you're turning the little knob on the end to turn the wipers on and off. So anyway, it's just kind of an interesting little thing. As you can see, I've got it all cobbed up here. I'll come back to that in a second. But on the 88, it had this whole thing going on where it had cruise control. So it's got cruise control on, off, and the resume, which is all part of this one switch. And then it has a button for set that pushes in. So it's got a switch and a button. And all that gets wired in through these wires that go snake down through all that fun stuff to go underneath the dash. So this thing just kind of slips on here onto the end, and then you put the cap on, and there you go, right? Well, this is supposed to secure to this little piece right here. So this metal, it's like a cast metal piece, and this edge of it actually is supposed to be connected to that, and it sheared off at some point. I'm not sure if this happened, before I got the original electric car, or if it actually happened while it was down at the shop. I don't remember it being loose like this, but it is now. So basically, when it's on here, and you're doing your turn signals and stuff, this is twisting all over the place now. And it's not supposed to. It's supposed to be, just solid and then up and down and towards you and stuff for the motion. So it was really bugging me, and I needed to try to fix this. And now is the perfect time to do this kind of stuff because it's out of the vehicle. So I can't fix that metal. I don't know how to weld, and even if I did, you're trying to weld this little tiny piece of metal in the end of the plastic to this. I just don't see that really holding that well. Maybe there's a way to do that, and we can investigate in the future. But for right now, that was just too much to deal with 3 days remaining before the car ships. So what I did was I took the old one from the electric car from the 87 that is very simple and is just a shaft of plastic, and it was broken. It was all shattered and broken down here, and this piece wasn't attached to it at all, and it still spins, but yeah, whatever. So this piece is, again, this equivalent to that, with those little two screws there that holds it in, and it's going to hold it securely onto the shaft, and it will probably still spin just because this spins. Maybe I can put a little dab of glue on that or something and kind of lock it up so it won't spin so easily. But at least it's going to hold it securely, and this whole piece won't slide around, which will make it somewhat better than it was. So anyway, that's just some electrical tape and some Gorilla Tape on there to try to secure that and make it as sturdy as I can make it. But anyway, another little project, little annoying things that we have to deal with with this whole last minute deal. So anyway, I just wanted to get some shots of this whole thing before I start painting, and we're going to try this tomorrow. Scuff it up a little bit with some light sandpaper, some high grit, like a 160 or something grit sandpaper, just to let the paint adhere to it better. And we'll get it all painted up with some hammered black, and then hopefully get it in the car. So that would be nice if the car would actually be, drivable or something. And we'll go from there. And again, it will have the new lock cylinder, or the old lock cylinder from the electric car back in there. So yeah, that's the plan. That's where we're at as of tonight. Fun, fun, fun.